There's a little chair for a schoolboy, but we're doing it. This is vlog 5, and today we're going to be talking about hard and soft magic systems in our writing and our stories, the ones we watch, the ones we read, and especially the ones we write about. Let's get into it. Okay, first question, what is a hard magic system? What's a soft one? What's the difference, and does it matter? Well, a hard magic system is one that tries to set up rules at the get-go, typically, for how their magic will work. So the writer is thinking through, what are the rules, and then how do I apply them into the story? Whereas a softer magic system usually comes out of writers who are more exploratory in their writing. Not always, sometimes they're developing a hard magic system as they go. They make a note, okay, I said this now applies to the rest of my writing. Let's make sure this all lines up. Let's adjust things in the past. They do those kinds of things. I try and do those kinds of things in my writing sometimes. But a soft magic system tends to be less focused on starting with the rules, but more about discovering the world. And sometimes that means course corrections happen, and the magic system doesn't work as well as, for example, a hard magic system that you might find in Mistborn would. There's a spectrum, actually, of hard to soft magic, and it's important to remember that. On the very far left side of the field, or if you're watching the video, the right side of the field, we could say is the hardest magic system, a physics textbook, in which all of the rules are unbreakable laws, and that's just the way it is. It'll never change. That's the way it is. You might come to understand it a little bit better, but the rules are very dense and right and exact. And if we move a little further down and it loses a little bit of its hardness, it gains a little more plush, but it's still a hard magic system. You have something, again, like Mistborn, a hard magic system. The rules can be bent a little bit. That'll always happen, or tends to happen, within the context of foreshadowing or characters gaining greater understanding of how the rules really work. And then if you move over and we start crossing into soft magic systems, we start thinking about things like Harry Potter. And then if you go a little bit further than that, well, I would actually argue a lot a bit further than that, you get something like the Flash TV show, in which every episode, once you get past like the second season, if you haven't seen The Flash, the CW's The Flash, basically every episode is solved by them inventing a scientific device that'll defeat the bad guys. And every episode, it's a different thing. Or they'll say things like, oh, we can never travel back in time again. And then by the next episode, they're traveling back in time, just because that's what they needed to do for the plot. And so they did it. And that's a softer magic system. Now, I want to say that any of these can be successful. I'm kind of ragging on The Flash, but I did watch the entire series and I did enjoy it. Physics textbooks are sold globally and they're taught in schools. Mistborn, wildly successful saga, as well as the Harry Potter series, also very, very successful in its own right. And these exist across the spectrum, so readers can appreciate all of these kinds of writings. Now, I will note that if you're trying to sell to fantasy readers, you probably shouldn't write a physics textbook, but I'm assuming that I don't need to really delve into why that is, because you're writing to fantasy readers. You hopefully have some kind of notion of what they're looking for beyond a physics textbook. Now, any of these can be successful, but what you choose will impact how you write the mysteries and magical elements of your story. So let's get into that. Let's talk about, what does a hard magic system offer? Number 1 on the docket, hard magic systems can use previously established rules to foreshadow what will come next. So for example, if in your story you've established that certain characters can store magic inside of rings, and then you introduce us to a character that has a plethora of rings on them, there's a bit of foreshadowing about what this character could do. There's a bit of foreboding about them if they're evil, or potentially a bit of excitement if they're good about what this character can accomplish, especially if they're introduced in the right moment. And you've been able to establish literary themes for us using a magic system. You've been able to set up a cadence for us in terms of what to expect, and you're telling a story in a way that if I just walked into it and there was no magic system, a dude with a lot of rings doesn't necessarily mean a powerful guy in a magical kind of way. And so using a hard magic system provides you the opportunity to foreshadow in a way that you would not otherwise be able to. Hard magic systems can also narrate fights more technically. For example, again in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn saga, what you have in a lot of those fight scenes is descriptions of them pushing and pulling on their magic, and he's established what they are. He talks about burning iron and steel and copper and pewter, and all the while oh, pewter, that means they're getting stronger. They're burning it so they can have strength. And he's established a hard magic system that allows him to narrate fights more technically, something I think that Sanderson likes to do. Now, I want to say a couple of things here, because hard magic systems are great, but if they can't be explained well in the context of your story, it'll start to look less like a story and more like what we talked about earlier, that physics textbook, that math textbook. It'll start to feel less like I'm engaging in your world and you're telling me a tale, and more like you're text dumping on me. And I've only ever seen one franchise pull off text dumps consistently, and it's Star Wars. They do it at the beginning of the film. They're the only ones I know that can do that. We don't have the repertoire of Star Wars, not unless you're a Pokemon creator, and yeah, it's like, why? I mean, thanks for watching this video, but like you've already got a great track record. Keep going with that. Also, Pokemon doesn't do that, so don't start doing that, please. If you're watching this video, leave Pokemon alone. It's beautiful. If you're a world builder and you like to develop hard and fast rules, that's great, and you want to inform your reader about them, but here's my caution to you. Do it within the context of the story. Explain the rules as they become relevant. Remember that a story has three basic parts to it: the promise, the progress, and the payoff. And what you want to be asking yourself is, whichever part of the story you find yourself in right now, is the rule I'm explaining and introducing relevant to that? Is it relevant to setting up the promise for what the book will be like? Is it relevant towards the progress, or is it relevant to the payoff? And can I do that in a way that contributes to the story as opposed to taking away from it? Now, on the other side of things, there's the soft magic systems. A softer magic system will tend to rely more heavily on the world and the characters, more broadly the world, to show what is coming. And these kinds of systems can make pivots in their rules as long as the world feels big enough to allow for it. So I think of Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban. It's probably become a more infamous case of it. But at the time, people received it really well, I think. The franchise was wildly popular. And maybe you don't, but the 7th book sold more copies of it than the Bible the year it was released. That's a historical feat, wildly popular series. But Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban, this is book 3. Hermione has this thing called the Time Turner. It's a pendant that allows her to turn back time. And this is used as a solution in the 3rd book, and then it disappears, and it's not used when it could be used in the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th. And I believe, if I remember correctly, something is written in about how they're destroyed. All of the Time Turners are destroyed. And it is probably a cop-out. But it works within the content of the story, within the context of the story, because the world feels big enough that something like that could actually happen. And so you can accept it as a reader and continue forward with the story without having such cognitive disassociation, cognitive dissonance with what's going on, that you're like, why aren't they just using the Time Turners? This is ridiculous. You can accept that this is the solution that the writer had for the story, and it feels like it belongs within the story still. And so softer magic systems have the room to change the rules of their stories a little bit as long as the world feels big enough. That's a pro for them. They also have a unique way in which they can unravel mysteries. When the rules aren't clearly laid out, it can leave us as the reader wondering what's behind the corner. Is it something bad and terrible, or beautiful and wonderful? And how will we come to know these things? Harry Potter feels mysterious when you're reading them as a kid for the first time, because you don't know what's coming. You're like, okay, what is in the walls? What petrified the cat? What is going on? Because again, the magic system is not plainly laid out for you. You are, like the students you follow, discovering it. And so there's a strength to that. My challenge to soft magic system writers is to be careful about how often you invent a solution to the story that you don't incorporate throughout the story. So I think back to The Flash. Okay, we're going to go fight this bad guy. Oh, we lost. Okay, well, if only we had a device that, could blow them up. Oh, look, a device that can blow them up. We did it. Do that again the next episode. I like The Flash. I do think people can get away with it. I don't think it's great storytelling, and I wouldn't defend The Flash's storytelling to anyone who said, you know what, Ben, The Flash's storytelling is awful. Okay, I feel you. I think the first season, maybe the second one, they were telling story. Then they became much more episodic. Not to call out Pokemon, but you did it too. Um, Not the point. I love both of those things. But my proposal to you guys is simply this. Most people can't get away with that. Most people will get bored of that. And it works better to incorporate whatever solution you've developed throughout your story. So for example, the time turner, which again is a write-in solution in order to solve the problem of the third book, which is how do we save the hippogriff and how do we help Sirius Black and all of these threads, how do we tie them together? I think the reason readers weren't particularly bothered by the introduction of the time turner is because Hermione is shown using it throughout the book. It's not explained, you don't really understand it until the end, but in the end when it comes, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, I'm good for that. That explains, I've been wondering about this since chapter 2. How is Hermione taking so many classes? Is she getting older than the other boys? What's happening? Oh, okay, she has a time turner, and so it begins to make sense. My challenge to you is that if you introduce a new magic rule or system at the end of your story or for a solution of your story and you haven't built upon it, it's gonna cause some dissonance. People are gonna wonder, why did I bother with the story when they were just gonna invent a solution at the end? What was the point of all of the progress if none of the progress actually contributed to the solution? So again, I think strong hard magic systems and strong soft magic systems are beautiful in their own right. I think that you can have either. I think that you can write stories that do one and the other and different stories. I think that's totally okay. What are some of your favorite magic systems? Do you like the magic system for, say, Aragorn or Fourth Wing? What kind of magic systems resonate with you, and what kind of magic systems show up in your writing? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, and thanks.